Welcome to the Oracle Codex podcast. In this podcast, we are unfolding the divine mysteries and remembrances of the Oracle. What is her story? What was lost that we are now reclaiming? And what is her medicine? Let's unwind and reweave our sacred history. I'm your host, Grace, and I'll be holding space during our journey together. Love you so much, and let's dive in. Okay, hello and welcome to the Oracle Codex podcast. We are so joyous to have you here with us today. I have the most beautiful angel, Eleja, here with me today. She is the owner and nurturer of the Sanctuary of Sophia. The Sanctuary of Sophia is for aspiring and rising oracles, medicine women, healing artists, and divine mothers. It is for the new earth leaders and ancient wisdom keepers of the sacred. That is a direct quote from her extremely beautiful website. I highly encourage you to check it out. She is a deeply devoted woman to the healing path and her mission with God, holding perfect holy space for her sisters to walk their own known path. On her site, she calls it a new Earth Sisterhood. Eleja is an incredible Sophianic Medicine Carrier, Shaman, and holder of the True Christ-Sophianic Grail Lines. I am so excited to welcome you here onto the podcast, Angel. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Please feel free to introduce yourself in your own way if you feel called and just say hello.
Thank you so much, beloved sister. It just feels like such a beautiful homecoming to be here and share in this sacred space with you. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you for the beautiful introduction and the invitation to be here. Yes, I am so deeply devoted to the rise of Gaia Sophia and all of the women that are really here to lead the movements of the new earth. That is something that I'm deeply devoted to and holding space for within Sanctuary of Sophia. And so I'm just really excited to tune in to all this medicine that's brewing here today between us, because I can feel it longing to come through, and I can already feel the depth that we'll be journeying today. So thank you for holding such exquisite space, sister.
Of course. Yeah, me and Alasia were just catching up, connecting, and we were talking about transparency. And I feel like that's going to be a huge medicine for the women who listen to this podcast is the divine expression and allowance of transparency with yourself and in reconnection to Mother God, Father God, in remembering who we are. And me and Alasia intend to go deep today. So, yeah, I just invite you to kind of relax your body and allow yourself to really enter the temple space with us here. It's extremely potent, and I'm so honored to weave this with you today. So, let's dive right in. I would love to understand and connect and hear about your divine connection to the Grail Lines and what that means to you and the women or the Grail Queens that you work with or Grail Kings. Yeah, what is your medicine within that and how do they show up for you? I would love an introduction to that weaving.
Thank you, sister. Yeah, such a deep piece for me. So, coming home to Sophia, to the Holy Mother, was really a beautiful initiation for me, coming home more deeply to myself and to my womb. And so, when I began to come home to my womb, I began to exit a lot of the false light systems that I had been guided into, which were all a part of the grand design and God's design for me. I really went into the belly of the beast, into some really uh, dark, false light experiences that really were harvesting my energy and my feminine
Mm,
power and creativity. And I felt really blocked. And there was this deep longing and desire that I felt in my soul around my mission. And by coming home to my womb and journeying with her and really deepening that, I came home to the Holy Mother, to Sophia. And that began my Christ initiation of really coming back to God without all of the religious context, because I was raised Catholic. And so I
Mhm.
had, a lot of unraveling to do. And so I was taken on this beautiful journey, and it just felt so familiar. And that's when I really began to awaken to my connections to the Sophianic Grail Lines, the true and angels, right, who have incarnate here, the 144,000, to really help create God's kingdom, heaven on earth here in a grounded way. And as I was going on this journey of self discovery, I was given a lot of different keys and codes where it was really this beautiful homecoming of validation around all this self doubt of who I was and who I am, and being like a feminine medicine woman and holding the Grail lines. Especially I hold the ruby shamanic lines, the true shamans of Christ, Sophia, the ruby Grail lines, like White Buffalo Calf Woman, who's a Sophianic Grail Queen. And I'm actually still in her territory. I just spent 3 weeks in the Badlands and Black Hills, that she had been calling me there for over a year to come. And it was a huge reclamation for me and my partner. And we really were able to be there on the land to remember what we carry and what it really means to be a vessel of God. And to hold the Grail lines is really to be of full service to God and God's mission for you. So that's how I interpret it, where it's so much bigger, but your deepest desires and dreams are God's deepest desires and dreams for you. And so the more that I've surrendered and not resisted who I am and my mission, because there was a lot of resistance, and also like false humility and not wanting to be, you know, in my ego or spiritual ego around holding the lines. And it's really not about superiority at all. It's about leadership and serving God and being willing to stand in your convictions and to stand for the truth and love of God and what God's asking you to do. And so I feel that that's really been my full circle moment of accepting the path of holding the Grail lines, of leading myself, and then also leading others and leading other women for their own movement that they're leading. And so it's been a really beautiful journey, and it's still unfolding, especially now as I travel the grits. But understanding that the Grail lines, I hold them, and I feel like this could go for all women. Like, you didn't just incarnate here and poof, like you have them. It's like you're a highly initiated soul. That's why you're
Mhm.
connected. That's why you're drawn to those teachings and that medicine, because you've already been initiated into it so many times over and over again. So it's really just remembering and giving yourself permission to access it and healing all the things that are preventing you from not accessing it. And with that comes embodiment. So yeah, it's been a really powerful journey, and it's still unfolding for me. And I feel like it's just the beginning, which is wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel like that could sort of summarize it in a little bit.
That's so incredibly beautiful. I adore everything you just said. And especially with, reclaiming it fully, this potency, this medicine and magic. And there's just an energy about it, when you feel who you are, like truly feel who you are, it does make you feel deeply empowered. And for women to walk in society feeling this almost like godly orchestra and divine creationality, and there's so much wisdom and information and love and creation that comes up. I feel like a lot of women they like humble themselves, or they reject it, or they you know don't know how to handle the potency of it. And I love so deeply that you shared that. And even and especially within New Age spirituality, where there is this disidentification with self and kind of rejecting self or all of the beautiful um, yeah, like information pieces. And it's not an identity, but it's just like a soul expression. It's just who you are, you know. It's not like an earthly ego identification. And I feel like you mentioned, you know, those experiences in the new age and kind of false light spiritualities, they're very desecrating to that remembrance and quite maliciously um, mind wiping. I would love for you to tap a little bit on like your experience with that, because that really just touched me really deeply when you mentioned that experience within your journey. And I feel like a lot of people start there, but too, it's easy to end up back there sometimes, you know, because people preach, you know, don't be egotistical. And then, you know, the medicine woman in leadership, she rises into her expression and business and, you know, and entrepreneurialism. And then we fall back into this, you know, pain of, yeah, I don't know. How was that experience for you?
I just have a bit of light language that wants to come in just to transmute because I can
Yeah.
feel, yeah, shukuya mano ni atia tia shukuya na kiararia to shiama to yama hekano yanaya shiama kolatia shukulato kutia to kushkuyana. Yeah. So in my experience, a lot of it was so deeply ungrounding. It was almost like so galactic and so taking you out of the human experience that your human experience didn't matter.
Hmm.
And it doesn't, and then it was like, well, I'm this all powerful being, but the human experience doesn't matter. And no one else's human experience matters. It's all about this mission and doing it. And it's like, okay, what is that? And the thing that really woke me up around this is like, what is the impact I'm actually making? Because yes, like I do multidimensional work, I do grid work, I do healing work, I work in those spaces, but I'm also, what God was bringing me back to was how important it is to serve people here in the body and serving them in a real way. And what being in the false light experiences, it took me way out of my power. It made me feel very small
Hmm.
because there's a lot of jargon and like big words and you know, things that are really in this like air of superiority that most people can't understand, nor like does it really matter in the grand scheme of things. Like I can understand a lot of that type of thing when it comes to grid work and it comes to dimensional things, but in the end it's like I'm not out there doing that. Like I'm here in a body and I'm here to support humanity. So I felt like there's a lot that gets lost in that space. And it wasn't actually serving me or my transformation and becoming more embodied in who I was. So it was like taking me further out and away from the truth of who I was. And so eventually my body was screaming at me saying, stop,
Hmm.
stop. And I had to listen. And that's when everything shifted. And then it was like coming back in and it was really powerful. And so I think, especially when you are a woman who's holding such ancient codes and keys and wisdom, and you have a big role to play, it's really important to be mindful of where you're giving your energy to and how it's impacting you and how you feel being in those spaces, because energy doesn't lie. So it doesn't really matter what someone says. It's all about integrity and it's about how you feel, and are you being treated with respect, and is your human experience being respected, and are you being treated as an equal in that space? And this can go from like reading someone's content to being in a container to be wherever it is, but it's like even coming in and really tuning into who are you taking in information from? And are you internalizing it as truth? And how does that feel in your body? Because if it feels bad, it's not in alignment with God. If it
Mm,
makes you feel like contraction, there's a difference between working through something, but true God, true organic living light is never going to shame you or judge you or make you feel unworthy. That's false light. It's coming home to God is deeply healing, and it holds you like through that space. So I think circling back to coming back deeper into the surrender of that true connection to God's source, it's all about really coming into knowing how to differentiate between what is true for you and in alignment with you and your direct relationship to God rather than through another area or other teachings. And always coming back to trusting your own body and trusting your own medicine and your own process, because no one knows that better than you. And if they try to tell you otherwise, that's a red flag.
mhm. Thank you so much. That is such potent medicine. And I love because this last week I've been kind of weaving and remembering so much of that. And I think we all come from these beautiful galactic origins, right? And then we get, or I'm kind of just processing this as it comes up. And I'm just going to be honest and vulnerable with the women who listen here because there is a lot of distortion. Like Eleja is saying, there's a lot of ego, and like it is quite contracting and almost, there are a few people in the spiritual community that have mapped out incredible things, but at the same time it is very disconnecting. I find that too, where huge words, huge explorations and identities and star races and all of these very technical things that are very beautiful for some people and very, supportive. But I find for myself as well, it fully pulls me out of like my inner standing and into this separation from my body and my gnosis. And I love so deeply, that we can talk about this because I think that there is this things in all spaces. They can get a little clicky and they can get a little, you know, factual of this is this and you can't do that. And that really takes away from the person's experience of their own evolution of finding God within themselves and within the body, like you're speaking on. And I've really just been coming back to that this last week. And, I have worked with these really, I guess you would call them like advanced, manuals and all this stuff where it's like very technical, but I never really ended up reading very far into it because it took me out of my body. It took me out of my experience. And I was like, some of this feels true, but how beautiful would it be to birth this remembrance out of myself and out of Yaya and like to feel it and feel her communicate that with me instead of it me reading it and fully having it be born from my mind and like this kind of intellectual space instead of bursting from the heart, bursting from the womb, bursting from this organic creationality. um, and I feel, yeah, it's a huge kind of web. And I just adore so deeply that you hold that medicine and you grounded it because who for a lot of beautiful, you know, angels and star seeds and all these beings, it can get a little heady and it can get a little airy, and we lose sight of this beautiful, perfect body that wants to communicate with us and wants to remind us that, yeah, we can source from self, and we can also, of course, learn from sisters and brothers and the beautiful teachers that are out there. But yeah, it can get a little messy. It can get a little overstimulating and a little too intellectual. I'm so thankful you brought that up. Like, yeah, I knew we were going to go deep. So thank you for, bringing that up and sharing that. And whew, yeah, I just want to let that land for a second because that's so deep. Okay. Whew. Eleja, I want to hear deeper into, yeah, your upbringing within your how you ended up, working with these beautiful medicines. And if you feel called to, the journey of your awakening and what that experience was like for you.
Mm, thank you, sister. I first just want to acknowledge all of the beautiful medicine that you just shared. And I just wanted to add one more thing before we move into this space is it is such a rite of passage to move through all of what we just spoke about.
Mm,
Feel that when you are truly here to lead and to be in your beautiful, powerful oracle, shamanic medicine magic of that priestess, of that angelic being, God takes you into these spaces because God's seen through your eyes. And it's important to know. And so I just wanted to kind of tie that in because I feel like sometimes like, oh, how did I not see it? That's at least that was my experience.
mhm,
And now it's like I understand because I help women get out of that now. And I am so more deeply connected to God because I went through that. So it really served a really extremely powerful purpose, even though it was challenging. So releasing making it wrong or bad or anything around that and just knowing that it is a big rite of passage and it's kind of hard to avoid when you are awakening. I'll just it's hard to avoid. It's everywhere. So it's part of your initiation of ascending. So yeah.
Love
Uh
that.
my journey. I actually was just writing something last night that I feel called to share because I'm in New Mexico right now. And I came here when I was 12 years old. And when I was 12 years old, I bought my first medicine bag. And it
Mm,
was this beautiful leather medicine pouch. And I picked out my own crystals and put it in it. And I still have it. I've kept it safe for 24 years. Um,
wow.
And just last year, I received a deeper understanding of my first shamanic tool that I received when I was 12. Because when I was 12, my initiation as a medicine woman actually ignited from this land that I'm on right now.
Wow.
And I just feel really blessed and grateful to be back here in this way. And I just got here a few days ago, so I'm still attuning to the land and what I'm here to do while I'm here, but it's a full cycle coming in. And so I went through an initiation beginning when I was 12 years old because with a month of coming back from New Mexico, my parents split up and my whole life just kind of exploded into this thing. And I went through a major upheaval. My parents were divorced. I moved schools after going to the same school for my whole life. My mom got remarried. She got pregnant. I had this whole thing happen. There was a lot that happened. And throughout my journey, I always felt, I was deeply connected to God, but I had a very challenging life because of a lot of change and a lot of trauma and a lot that comes with just the journey of a medicine woman. Because as I always share with women, your medicine is your story, it's your wisdom, it's what you've
Mm,
been through. A true medicine woman is embodied in her medicine, and that's what she carries and what she teaches because she's embodied and she's overcome and she can share. So I was very independent. I moved out when I was 18. I was working full time and going to school full time. I was in that very much like boss babe mentality of I was doing everything and I was very successful. I was promoted. I did all these things. I was a professional event planner and I ran events for like tens of thousands of people when I was 19 years old. It just was like,
wow.
so like in that leadership position, and just kept going and going and going and going. And then I moved up and I did other things, and I was running trade shows and international things and coordinating for all these high executives and all these things and doing all of it. But it wasn't, I felt I was moving through burnout. I wasn't healthy. I was everybody's therapist. I was very much in the wounded empath. So I was in a lot of codependent relationships. I was everybody's best friend. I held space. It was just what I did all the time. I didn't realize what I was doing. And so I was very depleted. And things started to spiral out. And I went through a dark night of the soul. There was a lot going on in my personal life. I went through an abusive relationship with an ex-partner in my early 20s, that I literally picked myself off the floor because it was the first time I connected with my higher self, was when I was laying on the floor dissociating, thinking like, is this going to be my life for the rest of my life? And my higher self was like, no, you have a choice. And I left the relationship within like a month. And that's really when my spiritual awakening journey began, when I left that. And so I started going into things. Fast forward to 2018, I was doing corporate marketing, running a team, blah, 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 blah. Really burned out, miserable, not happy, really disconnected from my body, unhealthy, really just in the trenches of an awakening about to explode, and kept hearing God, quit your job, quit your job. I was like, I can't quit my job. What am I going to do? I had a house, I'm like, I can't quit your job, quit your job. I was like, every day I'm like, I'm getting closer to doing this and I don't care. And finally one day I just had enough, and I walked into my boss's office and I put my notice in, and I was like, yeah. And I remember one of my really good friends, we worked together at the time, and I told her, she's like, what, are you crazy? I was like, I feel so good right now. And so I made that decision. That weekend, I went and camped in the woods for 3 days. I had really, really deep, spiritual, profound experiences with the plants and with the earth. And then a week later, I met my sacred union partner, Elijah.
Wow.
And that was it. And then 5 months later, we moved to Charleston, South Carolina, because I was already planning on living there. And we met, and on our third date, all the stars aligned, and we ended up going there spontaneously on our third date. We went on vacation, and while we were sitting there, he's like, we should move here. And I was like, yeah, we are. We're actually doing that, because I already knew. And then we moved there. And then as soon as I got to the Charleston grid and I left Ohio, and it was just me and him, within like 2 weeks, God was like, start training in your psychic abilities. And I took a psychic awaken abilities class, and then the rest was history. And then within 4 months, I was called to Peru to sit with ayahuasca. And I didn't know who she was. I just felt like cellular memory for the first time in my life, in my
Mhm.
body. And I knew I had to go. I always knew I was going to go to Peru. I felt deeply called. And so it just happened in 2 months. And then when I went to Peru and I sat with her, that's when she brought me online, and she showed me I was a medicine woman. She showed me who Eleja was, because I was still holding my birth name, Barbie at the time. And
Wow.
she showed me who I was, what I would be doing. She showed me that I've been a very ancient medicine woman, working with her for forever and ever and ever. And after I left Peru, that's when everything just went, then that's when the initiation really began. And I started going deeper, and my light language came online, and all these things started happening. And I've been on that path ever since. So it's really been quite a journey of reclamation. And so I really understand women coming from the 3D corporate, not connected, and then just massive awakening and shifting. Like, I've completely transformed into another person, but I'm more me than I've ever been. And so it's really possible. It's just about taking the leaps of faith, even when you're scared. And I'm still
Mhm.
doing that now. It's just in a much different way. But God rewards you when you listen. And I think that's something that's a really powerful piece here, of like, that's what we're moving into, is leading from our hearts and our wombs. And even though I had no idea what was about to happen when I quit my job that day, God was like, here you go, here's your union, which I had been wanting and praying for my whole life. And I wasn't expecting it. So um
Wow.
it's just, I think a big part of that is the story of what it takes to shift, is to make the big moves. And so the medicines and everything that I've gone through since then, of walking the path of the medicine woman and going into deeper study with the plants and remembering who I am, and it's all part of it. And a big part has been just trusting my own medicine and my own process with God.
Mm, yeah. I just want to let that land. There's like so much.
I know. I'm so
There's
sorry. I
so
was
much
like,
I want to ask you about.
that was my life story and a journey. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for receiving and listening to that, because
of
there's a lot of
course.
pieces there.
Yeah, I want to ask you. Well, it's so interesting because I spoke to one medicine woman the other day for the podcast as well, and her journey kind of was a slow upbringing, which is so beautiful. But then there's others of us who will almost kind of be like, have a little whack. It's like, wake up, girl. And I love so deeply, when you trust God and you trust the process and you just let yourself crumble and fall into that remembrance and fall into that awakening, it is so rewarding. And to hear, that you received your beloved, you received so much, remembrance, and then to be called to Mama Aya, ayahuasca. That's such a beautiful journey. I haven't sat with her before. I'm a little intimidated by her, to be honest, but I just hear the most amazing stories about her. And yeah, I love the remembrance of like that cellular, I think you said cellular remembrance with her. I was awakened by a plant medicine uh, um, what's the better word for it? I was gonna say weed.
Ganja. She likes
Yeah.
ganja. Yeah.
Ganja, yes. Very. It's so amazing when, well, I feel like they're such ancient elders for awakening. And when they awaken you, it's like just very kind of intensive awakenings. And but they speak so deeply to us. And I feel like they're such great tools for deepening even our psychic abilities, right? I know you took a course, but I'm sure that that also expanded your ability to connect with yourself and with source. And yeah, I too love that you changed your name. I would be so curious to, like, what is your feeling and understanding with like the names that we receive from birth, and then the names, like when we have that deep remembrance of self and we feel called to have this shift of identification. What was that experience like for you? Was it extremely, I'm sure it was extremely liberating, to take on a new identity and name.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. I just want to give a shout out to the plants, because they are truly like the messengers of this awakening. And there's a lot of like bad energy that they get a bad rap for a lot of things. And they're really incredible ancient elders, just like you said. And they are so instrumental when used with reverence and an authentic connection. And so, yeah, just honoring them in both of our journeys, because Ganja played a very deep role in my journey as well. And really a lot of what I have gone through and learned has been through my initiations with her. So yeah, giving it up for the plants. So I'm a plant medicine oracle, so I can't not, like, I just am
Oh,
like, I have to
wow.
acknowledge them, because
Oh.
they are really yeah, they're really here to help support the awakening cycle here. So but yeah, it's really interesting about the name. This comes up actually a lot. So with, there's nothing, I want to say this, like, there's nothing wrong with my birth name. And I went by, Barbara, Barbie for my whole life. And there came a time during my shamanic initiation where I was given the name Eleja, and I was taking a journey. I was in 2020, I was taking a journey, and it was like, what is your shamanic name? And it came in big bold letters, and it was like Eleja. And I heard it and I saw it. And then I was like, oh, wow, I've never heard of that name before. But then also, who Mother Ayahuasca showed me, that version of me came in with the name. And I was like, oh, that's who that is. That's Eleja. And then over time, it was like, yeah, this is your shamanic soul name. It's a name that represents your essence, and you're gonna be going by Eleja one day. And I was like, no, I'm not. I like laughed. I was like, there's no way I'm changing my name. Absolutely not. That's way too uncomfortable. What would people think about, all this stuff, that where I was at. And then eventually it became more and more uncomfortable for me to go by Barbie. And I was like crawling out of my skin because Eleja holds a much different frequency and energy and has access to medicine and teachings and wisdom and leadership and just capacity than that name of Barbie. And so it's almost like there came a point where I was like, it's happening. And so that was about a little over 2 years ago when I decided to change it publicly. And I went through a really deep process around it. It was really scary to do it. I announced it, and I created like new social media profiles. And it was a very deep thing for me. And what I would say is that, and then eventually the second piece came in because I was like, well, is there another part of Eleja? Do I just go by Eleja? Like, what is this? And then God was like, SunStar. And it just dropped in. And it was like, Eleja SunStar. It's time to accept it. And I was like, okay. So when you feel your soul name come in, and like it's just an experience around embodying that new identity. And not everybody is going to go through that. Not everyone will go through a name change. It's a very personal process. And for me, it's been, I feel so much more in my power and connected to my mission when I'm holding the name of Eleja. And now when I introduce myself to new people, it's Eleja. But, there's a lot of people from my past who won't call me Eleja, and it's too uncomfortable for them. And it's like, that's okay. It's okay. But when they say Barb or Barbie, I'm like, it almost feels like I'm like going back into like an old and I'm like, this feels really weird, and it doesn't, and it's very far and few between. And I think eventually it doesn't bother me enough right now to make a boundary and say, I need you to call me this, because there's more important things that I'm like focused on. But I think, I meet a lot of women who are like, I really want to change my name, but I'm too scared. And that's something I help women with, because I'm like, I get it. I received a lot of shit when I said when I was changing my name. I got a lot of like, people were really uncomfortable with it, and I got projected on a lot. And it was intense, but it was a huge part of my transformation, right? And it still is. Like, I'm still anchoring in. Like, it's just like the beginning. So I think it's all about like what you're being called to do, and really tuning in and being like, is my name that I'm going by, is it still in resonance with me? And not getting caught up on labels either. Not making a bigger deal out of something. Like, don't feel like you have to change your name in order to do, because that's not what it's about. It's really like God gave me this name, and I knew I needed to move into it in order to hold and lead the way that I'm being asked to. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for opening up and sharing that. It's so funny when you said that your name was Barbie. I was like, I love that name, but also you hold so much Eleja. Just, it's very potent. When I look at you, it is like, you don't need validation, but I see you so deeply as Eleja. And thank you so much for sharing that. I notice there's some times in the spiritual community, like the urge to confine people, I find, or if people take an action. I mean, I guess this is just kind of the human psyche in general at this point in time, is like, how could you do that, or don't do this? But I just and am in so much reverence that you chose to do that, and that you, yeah, I feel like when we listen to God, it just pays off. When we listen to God and follow the will of God, it just opens us up. It's like you said, initiations over and over. Like this life is really just kind of walking us home. Oh, I just want to see if anything else is coming through. Hmm. How are you feeling? Is there anything coming up for you, sister, that you feel like you want to chat about or bring up
Mm,
into the space?
Thank you for asking. I just am really leaning into like following the path of your destiny and really attuning to God's divine will for you and like expanding on that, because I just know that it can be terrifying to our ego when we're asked to make big moves and to follow based on faith and to take leaps of faith when we don't have evidence that it's going to work. And time again, when I've been asked to take leaps of faith, like this grid work mission, closing down my business, brick and mortar business, moving everything into storage, buying an RV when I had never even lived in an RV, slept in an RV in my life, and coming to do this was a huge leap of faith. And it has resulted in the most amazing transformational changes in me and in my life and in my reality. And so every time that God asks me to do something, oftentimes God will like show me a timeline. He'll open up a timeline and ask me to step onto it. And it's just like a bigger like jump to make from the last time. I think it's so important as women walking this path to trust our intuition and to trust ourselves.
Mhm.
And coming back kind of full circle of like, yes, come back to your intuition and what you know. And it's okay to receive mentorship and support and sisterhood for honest reflection. Because a lot of times when we're going through a transformation and we're moving through the smaller self aspect, we can't always see ourselves clearly.
Mhm.
And I lived in that for a very long time of playing small. And I know a lot of women who are highly advanced souls and angelics tend to do this because they're in that service and that humility, which is powerful, but also can be a shadow. And so I think finding support and mentorship and sisterhood of women who can see you and can hold that timeline and space for you is really important. And it's okay to receive that. And you don't have to walk the path alone, and always come
Mhm.
back to your own gnosis. But I think, when I reflect back on my journey, without sisters and without mentors of women who could see like, wow, this is actually where you're going, I don't know if I would have believed it, because I was in so much of this journey is like beyond our wildest dreams. So if you would have told me 5 years ago I'd be doing this, I would have thought you were crazy, and I would like that, I never would have imagined it, right? So having someone who can hold the vision for you, with you, I think is really
Yes.
important, and in a safe and loving and authentic, reverent way that is still in service, right? And there's no agendas. It's like it's God's agenda, and always coming back to that. But there are so many gifts that come from listening to your heart and taking action. And it's what we came here to do. We didn't come here to play small. We came here to really embody all of our gifts and our medicine and hear
Mm.
them. And I really feel that there's just one piece, sister, that I feel coming through that kind of connects in, which is like, you can't be wealthy and serve God at the same time. And
Mhm.
this has been a big piece coming in. I think because we were talking about false light and all of that, that's like a theme of like, you can't be spiritual and have money, or you're selfish, or you're egotistical, or you're not in service, or whatever. And God just keeps showing me like, God needs us to be able to hold massive amounts of wealth, because a big part of my mission is to circulate wealth in the areas where it needs to be circulated according to God. And so I think a
Mhm.
lot of the feminine women here connecting into this we are meant to hold massive amounts of wealth, to do that, to serve the children, to serve humanity, and we're stewards of that. And so that just wants to come in to just know that like it is possible to do that, and we don't have to play small, and God doesn't want us to play small, because we have work to do, and we can be spacious and abundant and have what we need and serve God, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. We don't have to self-sacrifice anymore. So just coming back to all of that full circle, that's what's coming in right now, about really
Yeah.
really amplifying and anchoring that into this space. So thank you for holding space for that.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a huge wound that so many people struggle with. And like you're saying, especially for women, being in these models of isolation, being in these models, and even with the feminist movement now, it's like reversing itself where I'll do everything then. I'll just, be the man and the woman. And there's so many distortions kind of circling the field. And it's tricky, but it's also clear when we come into stillness and kind of purification with God, where we are we are everything, and we can do it all. But also, like you're saying, it's so deeply, deeply important that we lean on each other, and that we have each other, and that we know that God has our backs if we really listen and tune in and connect to what is right for us and what is wrong for us and what is serving us and what is not serving us. And totally, like, society, or not society, but spiritual circles have kind of demonized wealth and money, when it's deeply feminine to have abundance and to have this flourishing overflow of like life force, and also, you know, um, energy. Like I'm learning how to perceive money as energy, and using it as a conduit and exchange, right, with the people that we serve and who serve us, and how we can help. And like you said, holding space for the new earth to be born, for the new hospitals and the schools and the children and the elders who are going to need, you know, this next phase of what earth is coming into. It's so important that we just unchain ourselves and like release these bondages of what has been placed upon us, that is, societal reprimand, or even like the experience you shared with changing your name. Like, there's so much push on who we should be and how we should act and what we should do and how we should embody, and it's so limiting. It's wild. It's so limiting. And God just sees us, like when you connect to that God source version of self, and this like beautiful, and that is, I guess, that's absolutely what the oracles, the medicine women, the leaders are here to open up into and to activate through our own DNA and through our own bodies, is this remembrance of, hey, you're absolutely epic, and you can do almost anything that you could even ever imagine, and that you're so deeply held. Yeah. And I love so deeply, maybe you have something come through here for like the body, because the body is just communicating so deeply with me that this like temple is so vital to the holy remembrance of who we truly are. And, as we touched on in the beginning, it's so easy to get pulled out of the body into the galactic kind of intellectual um, mind fields. But this temple, this holy existence of self and of everything that, like, this abundance, it is like right here. And when we work with herbs and yeah, like it's very grounded in its nature. And I almost wonder if it's kind of intended to pull us out of our bodies and into these kind of intellectual fields of distraction and yeah, overstimulation. is there anything coming up for you on that experience and, you know, yeah, just like this reclamation of divine self?
Mm. Thank you for sharing all of that, beautiful sister. Just tuning in, and I think it's all about balance.
Mm,
and and yeah, that's what's dropping in, is around balance, and that taking time to take you out to connect and come back in, like unplugging even,
yes.
where you're being called to sit in nature and to journey, whether that's with or without plant medicine, even with sacred tobacco, and just communing with the earth and taking a break from technology, even for just 24 hours, 48 hours, having that reset. It's about balance and being mindful of, yeah, what is distracting you and all of the noise and what you're taking in. And like, are you being influenced? How are you being influenced? And recognizing if there's too many things coming in to influence you, is that dimming your own message and medicine of following, like, of that self leadership piece? And who are you listening to? Because the internet is a noisy place.
Yeah.
And when we are on, so especially when we're on social media, and I know, that's how we all connect, and it's amazing. We can all connect that way, but the balance of coming into practice and taking time away from screens and technology and all of the energy of social media can be really powerful to be able to continue to walk the path in a grounded way, because otherwise you're just kind of swept up if you're not coming back in and taking time to be in your own energy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sister. Before we finish, I would love to hear what is new and exciting in your world. I would love for you to share your beautiful offerings. I know you have so much beautiful information, energies, frequencies, upgrades, and activations coming through for you in your sister circles and your sister spaces and how you hold space for women. So, yeah, please inform us of how we can connect with you and what you're up to.
Thank you, sister. Yeah, so there's so much coming in, being birthed. So the best way to connect with me is on Facebook. For my name's Eleja SunStar. I have a private Facebook group. It's called Sacred Shamanic Medicine Circle, and I do a lot there to support the sisterhood and the feminine leaders and the medicine women and the oracles. So that's a great place to join and connect in. So I definitely recommend jumping into the group, because I do a lot of fun stuff in there to support the sisterhood. And yeah, right now, the latest container that I'm about to begin to hold is called the Queen's Council, and it begins on December 12th. So I'm not sure when this is coming out, but yeah, it's all about reclaiming your queendom through your womb, because your womb has a holographic blueprint of your queendom. And when you come into reclamation with your womb and your queendom, you can actually begin to really connect into what's in your queendom and all the aspects in medicine and what you're here to birth and create. And so I'm holding a container for 5 weeks to lead the queens into the new year of really that queendom visioning and what we're all being called to birth, and we're going to do it together in a council. So I'm really excited about that, because it's going to be womb reclamation and deep healing, and then also a lot of feminine leadership and mentorship. And we're going to break through a lot of things that are preventing the queens from rising. And it's going to be supported by the Grail Queen energy as well. And then, yeah, I'm also open right now for one-to-one sessions as well. And I'm going to be inviting some women in to connect with me in my 3-month private containers. So, yeah, I'm opening up space for one-to-one work for deeper journeys of transformation through all the things we're talking about, to really be able to tap into your medicine and create your life from that embodied place of power and of being able to trust yourself and lead yourself. So yeah, there's lots of other things coming, but that's what's in the space right now. So thank you so much. And you can find me on Instagram at Sanctuary of Sophia as well.
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for speaking with me and sharing your story. And yeah, I feel like so many women are going to be so held and nourished by the words that you shared today. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for listening. It was such an honor. And we will chat with you soon.
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Oracle Codex podcast. It means so much that you're here listening to the Oracle speak and share their wisdom and enter the temple space. If you'd like to stay up to date on this podcast, please subscribe on your streaming platform. Please give us a big like. And if you have any opinions, questions, concerns, or love to share, please comment it below. If you want to find Grace, the host of this podcast, you can find her on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and at her website, creationalcodes.com. Thank you so much again for being here, and we will see you next time.